Okay, welcome back to our second video here. Um, Welcome back to the Bivocational Pastors Network, Kingdom Builders. We have a few different names. Actually, the idea was to call it Kingdom Builders, but so many different ministries have that. Kingdom Builders is kind of our motto. But my name is Don McKinnon. I am the pastor of Legacy Church in Sutton, Massachusetts. I am also bivocational pastor. And why we are having these videos, why we are doing these videos, is basically to encourage everyone out there. And what I mean by that is there are a lot more bivocational and now co-vocational pastors than we expected. Uh, let's go back a little bit. If we go back 5 years ago to the pandemic, we saw the numbers increase. In fact, I'm going to put up on the screen for us a article by Carl Vaders, who is known for small churches. But this is what has been coming up in churches recently. Look at what this article is. And he points it out here. The bivo-covo option. This has led to massive rise in a number. Now, what he's talking about is when we go up here, he's talking about gone are the days, right here, gone are the days when a person entering the workforce expected to get a full-time job with benefits, and it's not just that, they no longer expect full-time pay on their first job. It's unlikely ever to happen for them. Think about that. That is what is going on. Basically, what we've seen in the last decade or so is the idea of the 40-hour-a-week job and something that you could enter in like as your first job to pay the bills is no longer an option. It's no longer there. Things have gone overseas. Things have gone the way of the dodo. Some jobs have become extinct. When I entered the workforce, let's see, 34 years ago, I worked at a job at Bradley's, and I actually was able to afford to share an apartment with my high school best friend. And that's just the way things were then. Now, there are kids that are staying home until they're 26 years old because that option is no longer there. When we look at what's going on in the workforce, it's causing different things. The money isn't there. And this is kind of bleeding over into full-time ministry because we have this idea, there are formulas, there are people that can sit there and say, if A, then B, using scientific mathematical formula talk. If A and B equals C, then D, that type of stuff, where they try to say, hey, you know what, the minimum wage in this state is this amount, so if every working adult gets minimum wage, then this should be the average amount that you should have people tithing in your church. And it just doesn't work that way because of the way that jobs are these days. And this is causing a lot of different things to happen. And then we have COVID happen, which then brings about a lot of different things within churches. Let's be honest. Let's look at this. We see where COVID happens for some states. The restrictions were there for months on end. Several months. My state, it was a couple of weeks, really, because there was action that was done, and a lot of legal actions happened that made it so that churches opened quicker. But what happened was, and I can remember this, is we had the last Sunday before COVID, we had an average attendance of about 45 to 50 people. And then when we reopened, we were down to 15 to 20 people. And that really just starts all sorts of things going on within churches across the country. We hear about this. In fact, here we are, 2025, and no churches have really fully recovered. You're going to have people that say, oh, we've fully recovered, and they might have, but it's through a lot of evangelism and other things. And sadly, churches closing have also helped other churches regain people, because you have, I hate to use the term homeless Christians, but you have Christians who have no home gathering place, and they're going to another church, and so that church then is thriving because it's gaining people. This has brought in something not new, because in the Bible we have verses. We see Paul was bivocational at times, but we have a rise in bivocational ministry. And this is what Vaders is really talking about in his article. If we go back here, we see this has led to a massive rise in the number of bivocational pastors, an increase that will be getting much bigger in the next couple of decades. Now, you look, okay, this is the pre-pandemic survey right here. A pre-pandemic survey from Lifeway found 26% of pastors were bivo-covo. So this is just prior to 2020 in the numbers. Then more recently, 2022, Faith and Leadership put the number at 35%. So in 2 years, we go from 26 to 35. So a 9% increase right there. Then we look at this. The Lewis Center for Church Leadership noted that active speculation that between 40 and 60%, speculation that 40 to 60% and maybe as much as 80% of one denomination's churches had bivocational pastors. Now, this might mean that here we see one denomination, so we're picking some group out of the hat. But if we're honest, I probably would say this 80% might be a little too liberal in its thinking. I'd have to go with the middle part, 60, more than 50%. I know in the area I currently minister in, there is a high number of bivocational pastors. And what I mean by that is there is almost every church that I know, save the larger ones, the ones that are about 75, 100 people or more, the pastors are bivocational. They're working a job and maybe taking a little bit from the church to compensate for what they're lacking, or they're fully co-vocational. They're not taking anything from the church so that the church can do more ministry. And this is what we're starting to see. And there are a lot of things going on. When we look at this article, it's just something that I think we need to be aware of. And so that's why this ministry is here, because if this is the growing thing, go back. Okay, I've been in ministry for 30 years. Almost all that 30 years, I've been an associate pastor. It's only been in the last 8 years that I've become a senior pastor. So I had 22 years of experience in ministry, the second chair, third chair, whatever you want to call that. But now, sitting here in the senior chair, in the lead chair, I'm seeing all this stuff go on. And back when I became the pastor of Legacy, I knew it was going to be a revitalization. I was just starting to learn what revitalizations were. We had an organization in the area called Overseed that was really beginning to fuel that and wanting to see what was going on in that. And what we have gathered is we have seen where basically revitalizations have kind of become a big thing. Like now it's widely accepted. Before, you were fighting for books and conferences and all sorts of encouragement. And probably within 2 years of me coming here, there was like a great explosion. I mean, in my church library, I have a whole shelf now of books on church revitalization. I have passed out more books on church revitalization to other pastors than I can count right now, because it is something that has become the need and the norm in churches. But when it comes to co-vocational, bivocational ministry, it isn't really seen as the norm. In fact, we hear, last week we talked about the 10 things we don't want to hear. We hear the norms. You guys don't have enough faith. You're not doing this enough. You're not doing that enough. Well, the thing is, if you're working a 40-hour-a-week job and you are in a revitalization where the church is new, and you're not getting support from your denomination or from a network, because let's face it, if you're a church planter, that's it. And this becomes the thing that like a lot of people in church plants want to see. They want to see those churches thrive. Some church planters, I've heard them say, let the dying churches die. And you really have to wonder, because what happens to those buildings? And it's becoming harder, especially in the current housing crisis, for church plants to find buildings. So there's like a whole wibbly wobbly timey-wimey, to borrow my favorite show, Doctor Who's thing, of what's going on. But when we look at these numbers right now, this stuff going on, when we look, don't know what happened there. Something is going wrong. I can't get back to the article to show you. But what is going on that we see right now is, what is there? Why is this not becoming something? There. Nope, that isn't it. We're sitting there and we're saying, what is going on? Why is this not the thing? Why is this not the thing that we can hold on to, grasp, and everything else? When you look at this article further down, he talks about the new realities of what is going on, okay? As he states here, let me see if I can bring this article back, because I don't know what's going on here. This is just weird that it's not on. I don't know why that All right, I apologize for this. I'm just beginning to learn the basics of editing and stuff for live videos, but for some reason it's not working. But let me go back in the article. I will put a link to this in the video description. In fact, I'm grabbing it now. But here's what we're seeing in this. This is what the article says. These stats and speculations have given rise to a fairly new term, the co-vocational pastor. I know a few co-vocational pastors. Like I said, these are guys who, rather than take a small stipend from the church and to make up for what they're lacking in their full-time job, thus being bivocational, these guys are, working a job that may be paying all the bills, and so they want to put that money towards ministries and other things that the church can do. So we're looking at this. Many will use the bivocational and co-vocational titles interchangeably, and I'll use the term bivo-covo when referring to both. So this is Vader's, what he's saying. Most see bivo as someone who will take a second job until their pastoral work becomes full-time, while covo is a pastor who chooses to stay in secular workplace as a strategic aspect of ministry. Okay, we already talked about that. But here's the thing. He says there are also an increasing number of pastors who are intentionally working at a secular job, not as a side hustle, but full-time. Pastors are no longer as anomaly, those with the side hustles. They're no longer an anomaly. They're not part-time pastors. They aren't waiting for something better. And so his whole thing is he's saying this is the new reality, the new structure. This is something that needs to be understood. And so what is happening is he's talking about how this is going into all sorts of stuff that we talked about last week, where these churches need to be kind of figuring out what's going on. Okay, that's not going to work. I don't even know where that one is. But this is something where we've got to see this, where there is definitely nothing going on. There is no encouragement. You can't really say a conference, because if you're working a full-time job, you're forcing yourself to find time to go to a conference to get encouragement. You're forcing yourself to take time away from your family. There's a whole bunch of things in this, and so this is kind of what I'm getting at with the network. The network is here to really begin to try to do this, and so making this a short video as compared to last week. So here's the thing. September 20th, if you're in New England, we're kind of a little south of central New England. We are in central Massachusetts. My church is Legacy Church. We are going to be having a bivocational, co-vocational pastors' dinner. To encourage pastors, we have Micah Smith, who is the pastor of First Baptist Church of Greater Rochester, New Hampshire. He is going to be speaking. He is a bivocational pastor himself. He is going to be here to speak. We are doing this because we have been given some funding from a pastor and his current church. This pastor is a friend of mine, dear friend of mine, the pastor that married me and my wife. He has been a mentor of mine for over 25 years, and he was in bivocational, co-vocational ministry for 50 years. For all 50 years of his ministry, he was working a full-time job while also pastoring and raising a family of 3 kids. So here is the thing. We're going to do this. We want to do this September 20th. It's going to be here at Legacy Church. It's going to be 4:30 to 7:30. We want to have a time for the pastors and their wives. So understand this. This is also open to the wives. We want you to gather and be encouraged and get to know each other, maybe trade phone numbers and information and stuff so that you can begin to build a network. We want to see networks built. We want to be able to do things. The thing I would love to do and see as this grows, because knowing what I've had to go through as a bivocational pastor and what others are going through, we see we can't make the SBC annual meeting, and there's been a lot of argument for years that they should allow through the technology, because we can figure stuff out, to do it via Zoom and different things. And if this is the growing number, let's say that 80% is true, then that's 20% of full-time pastors making the decisions for everyone, and the 80% that is having to work full-time jobs and do things are not able to speak up. And so not getting political in that, but what I'm trying to say is, what I would like to do is be able to bring in stuff like a conference, a Zoom conference, where we could have pastors from different churches get on and speak, even if it's, once a month via a Zoom meeting. I don't know, again, I've got some of these ideas in my head. I just haven't been able to think them out. We're trying to build a board here that would be able to help us fully flesh out these ideas. But that is what we are going to try to do. But if this is going to be the new norm for churches, and I think a lot of people, part of what Vader's article is, he's talking about how, denominations need to learn how to support Bivo and Covo as the new norm. In many, maybe most denominations, the structure, this is what he's saying, is set up to train, support, and promote pastors for full-time church work. And most denomination officials serve in a full-time capacity as well. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but if denominations are to survive, thrive, and continue to provide their churches and pastors with the help they need, they must take Bivo, Covo, much more seriously, seeing it as the norm and not the exception. So there's one thing. The other thing is, congregations must learn to adjust pastoral expectations. Most congregations will not be able to afford a full-time pastor from now on. And in many cases, the struggle to do so, along with the financial burden of an exclusive use church building, will create an unsustainable future. So what we're seeing there, what it's saying there, is we need to begin to understand what is going on there. How is this going to go with all of this? How are we building this? What are we doing? How is this going to just do this for that group? So we need to do something. We're going to need help. We do need help. We need to figure out what's going on. And so this is going to be something that I think is going to begin a good conversation with people. This is going to be something that is going to begin a bunch of stuff. And so again, sorry if this is a little disjointed, but bear with us. I've got some stuff. I'm also working on a podcast. I'm going back to a seasonal format on a podcast. It's not even the old podcast I used to do. It's a new thing that's going to be geared for the church, but that's a whole different story. But here we are. We need to begin thinking, and I'm thinking, like, I can tell you honestly, I think over the years, part of the reason why I've lost people at my church is because they do not understand what it's like for a pastor to be bivocational. They do not understand that, stuff like if you're looking at your phone, you're not checking social media. For me, with my bivocational job, I'm checking to see if there's jobs available, or I'm getting communication, and I really cannot afford not to do that. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I lost my job recently partially because of that. And that's things that people have to understand. And if people aren't understanding, and how do we get people to understand? How do we begin to like lay out what it is, especially if people have this expectation? They know that there is the local mega church. In my area, I've got a mega church down the street, and then I've got 4 other churches that are 500 plus people. And the question is, what do you do in those cases? Again, I'm not complaining. I'm not crying over spilt milk or anything. I'm just saying these are things that we need to be working to understand. So hopefully you're hooked in. Next week, I'm going to try to begin a series going back to my list that I had. I got to see if I still have that list printed. I know I do. But I want to go back to that list, and I want to kind of start to tackle things, and I want to get these videos even shorter than, like, this is half of what I had last time, but I want to get them even shorter. So before I start rambling on, I'm going to say this is Don McKinnon, Bivocational Pastors Network. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you later. We'll see you next week.